because one of the important things that we do at IdeaGen, and we just concluded our Dynamic Resiliency Summit today, Being Global Leaders, where we talked about dynamic resiliency. And this is exactly what Women in Cloud is doing with Microsoft and so many other organizations to change the world. And so to set the stage, in 2015, world leaders from all 193 member states. Now, I'll pause for a moment. 193 member states, and every single member state agreed to these goals. It's not lost on us that agreeing on anything is difficult, especially when you think about 193 member states coming together. And so in 2015, these world leaders agreed to these 17 global goals, officially known as the Sustainable Development Goals, or the SDGs. It's now 2021. At the beginning of 2020, we were looking at a 10-year horizon for achieving the global goals. And gosh, so much has happened. So much has happened in such a short period of time to highlight inequality. But at the same time, we've seen an accelerated push toward innovation, an accelerated push toward shining a light on inequality, which will help governments across the world hopefully address these critical inequalities. And so these goals have the power to create a better world by 2030 by ending poverty, fighting inequality, and addressing the urgency of climate change. Guided by these goals, it is now up to all of us, companies, governments, civil society, and also the general public, to work together to build a better future for everyone. I'll quickly go through the 17 goals so that you're familiar with what these are. The first is no poverty. We can all agree to every single one of these goals, but especially ending poverty. Also, goal number two, zero hunger. Ending hunger by 2030, where everyone can go to bed, as our good friend Atul Tandon says, with a full stomach. Number three, good health and well-being. 4, quality education. Who wouldn't agree that that's one of the single most important goals, to give everyone a quality education? Gender equality. Gosh, Women in Cloud is pushing hard to help level the playing field, to help female owners and leaders in business achieve success. And so goal number 5 is very special to us, to empower women and girls across the planet. Number 6, clean water and sanitation. Number 7, affordable and clean energy. Number 8, decent work and economic growth. Number 9, industry, innovation, and infrastructure. Number 10, which ties a lot of these together, which is what I alluded to, which is reduced inequalities. And again, this pandemic has showed us all that a bright light is shining on these inequalities, and we have a better opportunity perhaps today to know where they are and how we can address them. Number 11, sustainable cities and communities. Number 12, responsible consumption and production. Number 13, climate action. 14, life below water. 15, life on land. 16, and this again ties it all in, peace, justice, and strong institutions. And my favorite, number 17. Number 17 is the glue that keeps all of the goals together. And that's what we do at IdeaGen, Women in Cloud. Microsoft is a deep commitment to partnerships. And so it's partnerships for the goals. Looking forward to this incredible discussion this evening.
Thank you so much, George. That was a perfect way to set up the stage. And I think creating that awareness of the goals is exactly what we need here, is to create that awareness of all goals. So before we dive into our panel discussion, I'd first like to introduce Gina Angeli, who is our sponsor, to welcome her on stage for some sponsor remarks. Gina, welcome.
Hi, thanks, Christian. Thanks so much for having me back. And I wanted to say that my personal experiences and the inspiring energy of Women in Cloud have ignited a real passion in me about creating economic access and advocating for gender diversity in tech. And let's face it, technology is an extremely complex industry women in this space encounter challenges at every angle. In my personal experience, one of the biggest challenges was the lack of other women in the room, which made it difficult to find someone to be advocating for me. And I know I've heard other speakers today and different panels comment on a very similar experience. And so that's one of the reasons I'm excited about this event and the work that Women in Cloud is doing, and why I'm especially proud to take a very active role in the organization. But it's also vitally important that our work here does not end here. We must think about the bigger and look further beyond this event to how we all can commit ourselves and companies to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. As a woman and women in tech specifically, this shines a particularly bright light on the UN goal of gender equality. I'm proud to work for a company where gender equity has long been a core value. That's demonstrated at the top with our current female CEO. Accenture has an unwavering commitment to a culture of equality, and we've set bold goals to accelerate gender equality. For example, we are working to achieve a gender balanced workforce by 2025, meaning a workforce that is equally 50% men and women. And we are well on our way to meeting that goal. Women currently make up 45% of our global workforce, and I want to keep seeing more at the top of that pyramid. Accenture is also a place where women at all career levels can advance and thrive. 100% of Accenture's women are mentored and supported at every stage of their career. A great resource in our company is the Accenture Women Network. This is an employee group across more than 150 local locations globally, which serves as an in-person and online resource for our women to network, learn, and grow. We also offer flexible work arrangements, including job shares and part-time work schedules to support people at all stages of their lives. And importantly, we are advancing gender equality in the workspace by conducting annual global research and convening conversations to raise awareness and encourage action across the industry. We're leading from the front. Think about this. In our Getting to Equal 2020 research, we found that there is a perception gap between the way leaders and employees view progress towards equality in their organizations. If that gap were to close by 50%, the proportion of women who feel like a key member of their team with real influence over decisions would rise by 43%. That is the result of just simply changing perception. Inspiring and advocating for change is a key reason we are all here at this event. But it is vitally important that we carry this work back to our respective companies and into the world. Getting back to this moment and what this event is all about, I want to emphasize that Accenture is here to create mentorships and networking opportunities for you. I am personally excited about helping our next generation of technology entrepreneurs connect with the leaders here from Accenture. We are also here to help attendees explore new career opportunities. And during this event, we're looking to connect you with top females and to explore the roles in cloud that we have available. We'd love to have you help us reach our 50-50 gender equality goals. So thank you all for being a part of the Women in Cloud Digital Summit this year. And I can't wait to see what 2021 holds for all of us. Back to you, Christian.
Thank you so much, Gina. That was very inspiring remarks. Next up, we have our power panel for the session. And leading up the power panel as moderator is a good friend and colleague who I've had the privilege of working with in the past multiple times, and that is Kim Smith. Kim has spent the past 30 years pioneering cloud and digital innovation to empower people and organizations through technologies and accelerators as they redefine themselves, radically grow, and extend their reach exponentially by re-envisioning customer experiences, employee engagement, operational processes, and business models critical to driving profitability via transformation in the markets they serve. She has defined the go-to-market and portfolio strategy across digital and cloud services for a multitude of technology platforms, industries, and sectors at organizations such as the Bank of New York, Microsoft, Adobe, Capgemini, and IBM, as well as a number of startup organizations. With that, I'd like to welcome Kim Smith.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you, everyone, for giving me this opportunity to be part of this panel. As Christian mentioned, I have been a longtime friend, ally, and executive sponsor supporting IdeaGen and its efforts. And every year in September, we typically are one of the sponsoring firms at IBM supporting the Empowering Women and Girls Summit, which is typically held at the United Nations in the ECOSOC every year. This year it was digitally held through the 17 goals. And thank you to George and Christian for running a great event. But I'm even more excited going into 2021 as being one of the top 10 women of influence identified by the Women in Cloud. So thank you to Chaitra and the team for the recognition. Gina, it's always great to follow you. You're doing such great things at Accenture, and to all the other women who've won this year, congratulations. I'm looking forward to this panel today because in the work that we have been doing, not only at IBM, but working with IdeaGen as one of the advisory, thought leadership advisory leaders, is to focus on driving innovation through collaboration, through public-private partnerships, and through executive engagement across every sector. And the exciting thing about this is the speakers that we have with us today. I'm going to let each individual introduce themselves. They are powerhouses for sure, and I think that you'll really enjoy the opportunity to hear their perspective on 3 of the Sustainable Development Goals that we'll focus on for today's discussion. And now George went through all 17, but the 3 that we'll focus on today are number 5, which is around gender equality, number 11, focused on sustainable cities and communities, and number 17, which is, as the IdeaGen team shared, one that's very near and dear to everyone's hearts, which is global partnerships and innovative collaboration. So with that, let me go ahead and start by introducing each panel member and letting them talk a little bit about themselves, their background and experiences. And I'll start with Chantaline Carpenter, who is the chief of the United Nations Commission for Trade and Development out of New York. Chantaline, will you introduce yourself and share a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, and sorry we can't all be at the UN this year. Can you hear me? Yes? Yes.
Oh, sorry, Chantaline, I think we can't quite hear your audio. If you want to try again.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
So I was thanking you, and I was deploring the fact that we can't meet at the UN this year. So I'm disappointed to not be with you all and welcoming you in the house of We the People. But next year, everything, let's hope we can all be together. So I run the New York office of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. And it is basically the entity within the UN that works on the other part of SDG 17, which is trade and investment and related issues of entrepreneurships, technology, or the sustainable development. And so my role in New York and my team is to basically feed the knowledge that's created on these issues, on aligning investment with the SDGs and technology with the SDG into the intergovernmental process, so we can actually speed up within this decade of action, the acceleration of implementation of the SDGs.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chantaline. Lakshmi Prachari, who is the CEO and founder of Inc. I'll let you introduce yourself as well. Thank you for joining us so early in the morning, India time.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. So I'm Lakshmi Prachari. I'm the curator of Inc. Talks. And our charter here is how do we accelerate the journeys of game changers, because one of the things we are talking about is gender equality, and the other thing we are talking about is partnerships. And the thing that's essential for both of them is to have amazing leaders who are from a very, very interdisciplinary background across gender, across age, across disciplines, to not only be amazing leaders in themselves, but to be able to connect with others across disciplines, because a lot of times we connect with only people in our in a vertical, or probably our gender or our interest. So when we put an artist together with a technologist, together with maker, you have the most amazing innovative ideas come out, and that's really what we do, and focus a lot on women leadership. So it's really about finding great leaders and accelerating their journeys. And I think Kim, maybe you were talking earlier, and also about how each of us experience something in our careers, and that's what propels us to do what we do. And for me, 30 years ago in India, when I was here, I always felt when you're different, when you're pursuing a different path, everybody says, "What's wrong with you? Why do you argue so much? Why do you talk so much? Why can't you just toe the line?" And when you're in that different zone, at every generation, you're in that different zone in a different way. It's difficult to find a community that says "and" instead of "but." Most of the time, we are in a "but" community. We say, "Oh, that's a great idea, but nobody has ever done it. Why do you want to do it?" Instead of saying, "It's a great idea, and let's figure out what we want to do." So our goal is to create the most amazing network of thought leaders, and we focus on India. So it's about taking the best of India to the rest of the world and bringing the best of the rest of the world to India. So that's what we do, is find those game changers and create that and community.
That's fantastic, Lakshmi. Thank you for sharing that. And our final panelist, Dr. Christine Galeb, I'd like to introduce you and let you share a little bit about your organization as a Senior Director of Programs at ION Houston.
Sure. And hopefully my camera's coming on in just a second here. Great. So can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
That verbal and then head nod, the nonverbal, that does wonders in the online world. So thank you all for that. So as Kim said, my name is Dr. Christine Galeb. I'm the Senior Director of Programs at the ION, and the ION is located in Houston, Texas. So our vision is that we're accelerating innovation and connecting communities. So the themes of partnership and being not the well, but this, but the and this, that underlies what the ION is doing. Our mission is as follows. The ION anchors, activates, and accelerates the innovation ecosystem through partnerships, pathways, and programs that create opportunities to advance and sustain resilient economic growth in Houston. So there's a lot of P words in there, there's a lot of A words in there, but we're tackling the sustainable development goal that is sustainable cities and communities. And of course, other goals as well, but that's kind of our primary focus as we think about Houston's regional economy. So just a little bit about me. As the Senior Director of Programs, I oversee our Accelerator Hub. We have 4 accelerator programs at the ION, one of which I direct, the ION Smart and Resilient Cities Accelerator. I also oversee our academic network. That's the 10 colleges and universities that have a presence here in Houston. And I oversee our workforce development program, so leading to that resilient economy that drives Houston. I also oversee our mentor program. So that's a little bit about me. I will turn it back to Kim, and let's kick off our panel.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all for being such powerhouses in everything that you do and breaking new ground. I think what's really critical for the audience to understand is we have the macro to the micro focus in each of your experiences. So we have global point of view from Chaitra. Lakshmi has provided us with a geography point of view and how we're going to drive success in a very large economy in a specific area of the world. And then Christine, you bring us right back into our communities and how we make it real, where we're working and we're living every day. So with that, let me go ahead and kick off the panel. And I'm going to start with you, Chantaline. If you could please provide us with your perspective, and I think about the macro socioeconomic perspective on the current situation of COVID-19 as a pandemic. You've been looking this right in the eye for the last year and a half almost, and it would be helpful to give context to everyone here what you see from the UN's vantage point, what this means, and how it's impacted our progress in achieving the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thank you, Kim. Just checking that everybody can hear me. So yeah, good, love those. those visuals. Okay, so thank you, Kim, and it's a pleasure. And thank you, George, for introducing the 17 SDGs. And so great to have each of these level at which we can all act and impact. So at UNCTAD, we've been closely monitoring and analyzing the effect of the global pandemic on trade and development, including e-commerce, with a focus on developing countries. And actually, we started since February last year, before the pandemic was actually announced. And in November, we did publish a report that summarized all of those impacts with a focus on the impact on developing countries. We'll get back to that. So moving rapidly across borders along the principle of arteries of the global economy, the spread of the virus has benefited from the underlying interconnectedness of fragilities of our market and globalization, and basically catapulted a global health crisis into the worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. And hitting the most vulnerable the hardest, as I think we've all seen and heard. Now, but let's give you some numbers. We all know unfortunately, we lost already 2 million people, but we've also had 8.8% of the global working hours lost, 8.8% lost, equivalent to 250 million full-time job lost. Now, in perspective, if you wonder, this is 4 times more job loss than we did during the financial crisis in 2007. So we're not talking about the same thing. We lost 4.5% of the GDP, the world GDP, in 1 year. Foreign direct investment declined by 42% over the last year. Now, another major source of fiscal revenue for government in developing countries are remittances and trade. Well, both of them are down 10% in the year. We have 130 million people at risk of falling in extreme poverty. That's our goal 1. Going back on that, and George mentioned SDG 2 on food security. Many people worldwide put their life at immediate danger because of acute hunger. And I'll pause here just for us to realize this. Now, on top of this, the impact of COVID-19 is not gender neutral. Women are affected disproportionately to men. Women are employed and overrepresented in the most affected economic sectors, such as the tourism and services sector. And they're typically the first one to lose their job or to leave their job because they have added work at home, unpaid care that they have to do at home with children now being schooling from home. And the girls are the first one when we take out of education. If there's only one computer in the home, it's going to be typically the boy that will have access to the computer and not the girl. So we are at risk here going back at the year that we had 25 years of Beijing, where we were to celebrate the economic empowerment of women and gender equality. We're actually fighting back against the fight back. And we're basically losing ground. Now, another area that is really of concern to us is micro, small, medium enterprises. Why? They're the bedrock of our community. They create, in developing countries, up to 90% of the job. In other countries, it's between 50 and 70% of the job. And 50% of the world GDP is created by micro, small, medium enterprises. And they're harshly hit by the lockdown, increasing their risk of failure by 10% as of September last year. Now, we are going through a second wave of lockdown, and many of those small, medium enterprises add 2 months left of cash flow to be able to survive. And so this number is really getting to be bad. Now, I mentioned about women being worstly affected. Well, if you are a woman-owned micro, small enterprise, you're 27% more likely not to survive this pandemic, according to our study. So this is not getting in the right direction. And people, and it's understandable, are yearning to go back to normal. How often do we hear that? We have to really catch ourselves when we think that or say it. Because we live in a world plagued by increasing uncertainties, volatilities, and inequalities, with those at the bottom of the pyramid having limited opportunities and wealth, being wealth concentrated at the top, leading to social unrest, populism, and mass migration of people. We were not on track to achieve SDGs, having made little progress on SDG 1, 3, and 4, education and health, and poverty. But already before the pandemic, we were going down on SDG 2 and SDG 5, as I just mentioned, hunger and gender equality. And the little progress we were making them at the expenses of SDG 13, 14, and 15, which are life on land, life in the ocean, and climate change. And basically, as our Undersecretary General has famously said, we're literally waging war on nature. On top of this, the digital divide between developed and developing countries, rural and urban area, as well as women and men, is just been amplified by the COVID-19. It has deepened pre-existing inequality. What the COVID is doing is deepening pre-existing conditions. And it's basically also demonstrated our interconnectedness through our trade route and exposed the self-limitation of our outdated socioeconomic models. However, as Kim and George and people that know me well know, I'm an optimist, and I really believe that 2021 is an opportunity to rebuild better. Because everything is up in the air, so we actually can change things that we thought were impossible to change, like the trade regime up to a year ago was impossible to even think about it. Now we're talking about reform. Well, let's make sure those reforms help us achieve the SDGs. Let's have the courage and believe that it's important, and we actually can use this crisis to make this once in a generation opportunity to rebuild our economies, to deliver for all, and not at the expense of the planet. And so to do that, we need to have the courage to seize the day. And at UNCTAD, we're calling for a global sustainable New Deal, as we need massive investment in both developed and developing countries. Let's not forget the developing countries, because what are we seeing now? We're all hurting those vaccines, and then these variants are developing. They're going to come right back at us, and we're not going to go further. We're all in this together. We can't think we're going to isolate ourselves. If we want to reopen our economy, we need to help developing countries with their health system, with their broadband infrastructure, renewable energy, and sustainable agriculture innovation. And this will require massive public funds and policies that ensure that the private sector, you guys, have the right environment to align your investment, your innovation, and your creativity with the SDGs, both in developed and developing countries. And maybe there's need to be policies to also reduce some of the risk or the perceived risk of investing in these developing countries, because we saw that foreign direct investment is actually going down. And the developing countries do not have the fiscal capacity. They don't have, their central bank cannot do like the US central bank, Canadian central bank, and print trillions of dollars to hand helicopter money over to our head. They can't do that because it would affect their currency and then reduce their capacity to import the necessary goods that they need, like vaccine and masks and their food. So we can't have just national, regional New Deal. We need global New Deal. And we should, each one of us, encourage and support our decision makers that are trying to do this really hard play of saying to their population, we're going to help you because we know you're hurt, but we're also going to need to use, as the Secretary General of the UN said, 10% of the world GDP to support developing countries so we all get out of this together and go forward. Over to you, Kim.
That's wonderful guidance, Chantaline, and it's incredibly humbling to hear kind of what it looks like at the world level, what the macroeconomic, what the macro socioeconomic impacts are, and really that we all have a role in driving the shift that needs to occur. It's created what it sounds like from your perspective, a bit of an existential threat at a time when we couldn't afford to have one. And so with that, perhaps I could turn it over to Lakshmi and ask your perspective. You know, when you think about what you're trying to achieve in a developing economy and in the market that you serve, you are an incredible entrepreneur and storyteller. How do you convert the data that Chantaline has shared into motivation and a movement to change the way things are operating in the country where you're located?
Sure. It's been quite amazing. There are three major things that are going on in the world around us. One is we've moved from a very, very industrial economy to a creative economy, and which means that it used to be, it's the era of the large company, huge, setting up big fabs, and you need to have $1 billion before you can make an impact in this world, to somebody with a code in a garage who wasn't even born when most of us joined our companies, to be inevitable in our lives today, So there's a huge shift from a very industrial economy to a creative economy, where the trend was about the CEO knew it all. The leader is supposed to lead the way. It's a very, patriarchal way of leading. And I don't mean men or women. Whether you were a man or a woman, there was a certain way you led. And we are moving to a very creative economy where things are changing so fast that the only way you can stay afloat is by great collaborations, by nurturing relationships, by working with people who are half your age, who are twice as smart. So you're moving from a very, very patriarchal leadership style to a matriarchal leadership style. And so there's that shift going on. The second major shift that COVID has brought on is forcing us to look at everything. I mean, Chantal alluded to this in terms of it's just not human beings, it's the animals, it's the trees, it's the ocean. To be forced to have a holistic view. So just the shareholder value at any cost doesn't work anymore. So what is your overall purpose? So there's that huge shift that has happened where the younger generation is questioning us, hey, what are you doing for everybody else? So it's not just a check mark, but it's being diverse, bringing diversity into workplace or thinking about diverse, elements in the universe is important for our existence. And COVID has shown us nature knows how to take care of yourself. You don't behave well, it doesn't mind wiping you out. You are nothing. You are born on the 11:59 of the evolution of the universe, and you just don't matter. If anything, you're a pale blue dot and nothing else, So we've seen that's a second major shift. And the third major shift is, especially women at workforce, is not again a checklist. It is extremely important to be successful at the workplace. So for us, what I'm excited about is how do you bring it all together in defining what is Leadership 2.0. And for us, it comes out of, there is a Hindu mythological, thing of, we have three deities. There's a Brahma, the creator, Vishnu, the sustainer, and Shiva, the destroyer. And the beautiful thing about Shiva is that sometimes you have to destroy yourself to be able to be born in a way that you're suitable for the new generation. So it is about how you destroy yourself. The second thing about Shiva is that he is called Ardhanarishwara, means half man, half woman. So he has taken his wife into himself. So he has become half man, half woman. So the new leadership style is really about that, is that you need to have the patriarchal as well as the matriarchal leadership style within you. It's not just for the woman leader to nurture while the male leader can lead. It doesn't work anymore. It is important, no matter who you are, to be nurturing, to be mindful, at the same time to be decisive, to be combative, to be collaborative. Everything in the same person has to be developed. So the thing I'm personally most excited about with this is, number one, doesn't matter who you are on to a lifelong learning of how to destroy yourself and rebirth yourself and combine everything within you to be a global leader. And the second thing, especially working with women, to say the most work women have to do is with themselves. They have to learn to ask. They have to learn to say, I want. And I keep telling everyone I talk to is that the worst two words that were coined in bringing up a woman was be a good girl. I don't know what being a good girl means. Most of the time it is do what you're told and don't ask any questions. So we just tell a lot of the young women leaders we're working, just strike those things. Be good. Do good. But be a good girl doesn't mean anything. So in what you want to do, some people may like you, some people may not like you, but stand for what you want, because those who like you will be with you forever and you can't please everyone. So really, for me to work with women, it's amazing at any age how difficult it is for women to say, I want. How difficult it is for them to not raise their hand the minute a need comes up. You see this all the time. And so to say it's okay to say it's okay to say want, because that is what will lead to us doing better in this world. So that's really what we're focusing on, Leadership 2.0, and especially with women to be equitable, they have to ask for it. It's not going to come to them. This is the work that we do, and I'm very excited about it.
Lakshmi, I like how you tied together what Chantaline shared and some of the barriers and the challenges, and that we have to really step back and take a pragmatic look at our social norms, at our cultural kind of guardrails, and say which ones are going to work to drive a growth mindset and which ones are holding us back. Regardless of the socioeconomic status of a given geography or a country or a community, we continue to put barriers in front of ourselves because it's been traditional on some level, right? And how can we remove those barriers at that local level so that we can then extend our hand out to, the world on a global economy scale and say, what will it take for us to make these changes? Because if we can't make them in our own cities and communities, then it's going to be very difficult for us to achieve what Chantaline asked for, which is step up and show up globally. With that, Christine, I want to tie in some of the work that you're doing at the local level. And so when I think about sustainable cities and communities, which is the Sustainable Development Goal number 11, I think about the work that you're doing with ION and tying back to what both Chantaline and Lakshmi just shared. What can you tell us about what's working and some of the challenges that you're seeing in making cities more sustainable to extend some of those learnings and best practices to perhaps socioeconomic environments where you don't have some of the tech, or perhaps that aren't as advanced as the city where you reside?
So there's a ton of great questions in that question. So I'll try and kind of break it down a little bit. I wanted to stress a few things. One is the systems thinking nature of how we see the world. And I think kind of underlying a little bit of what Chantaline and Lakshmi have been saying is we have to take a look at the iceberg, right? And we've got to see, here's that iceberg. I'm only seeing the tip of it, but what's underneath the surface? Because whatever I'm seeing is just the observable event. It's what happened. I see it, you see it, everybody sees it, but not everybody sees the reasons, the rationales, the factors, the relationships that cause that event to occur. So I think we have to unpack systems thinking a little bit and think through the Earth is a system, right? It's an ecosystem, it's systems of ecosystems, it's ecosystems of ecosystems, and that goes all the way from the globe to the local level at the city. So something we've done here in Houston, just to highlight a few things, we have the backing of our mayor, and having the backing politically is a big carrot, because we're able to form a partnership with the city where every day I work very closely with the city, and we're bringing startups in, we're bringing organizations in, we're embedding innovation in a city, which when we think of a city, we may not think, oh, wow, they're the fastest moving organization in the world. But here in Houston, having that support, having a mayor that is tackling climate change head on, that is not afraid, who is bold to empower his people, to hire a chief resilience officer, which we did, and we published the Resilient Houston strategy a little over a year ago. We published our climate action plan on Earth Day of 2020. And in both of those documents, all the goals that Marissa Aho and Lara Cottingham and her team identified were all the goals that guided us as we navigated COVID-19. So that's one thing, is having the government that is strongly supportive of the work that you're doing at the local level, because that will also bring in point 2, the public-private partnerships that have enabled the ION to be successful. So we have our founding tenants and founding partners, Microsoft and Chevron, And you might be saying, oh, Chevron, well, aren't they oil and gas? But we see that Houston is now reimagining itself, not as the oil and gas capital of the world, but as the clean energy capital of the world. That's a major shift for a city that has been so historically tied to fossil fuels. So we see major players stepping up and saying, taking that listening approach, that leadership approach that says, hold on, I don't know how to do this. I don't know what carbon neutral means. I need to sit back and listen to what other people are sharing and what other people are doing. And then I need to go back to my organization and find the partnerships and the stakeholders that are going to help me achieve that. Microsoft has done a lot of great work in terms of programs and offering support for our ION Smart and Resilient Cities Accelerator. So making sure that if a startup in the accelerator needs a mentor or a subject matter expert, they're literally a phone call away. Intel, we mentioned the digital divide a little earlier in our conversation. Intel has stepped up to the plate, not just to provide programs, but if you don't have the internet, if you don't have a laptop, you're never going to access those programs. So what Intel has done is they've partnered with the ION, the City of Houston, the University of Houston, and several other organizations in Houston to bring a scaffolded approach to closing the digital divide. Get a laptop with a hotspot, and as soon as you open the laptop, there's a program right on it ready for you to learn how to use a computer. That way you're positioned to then take that high-level artificial intelligence course. I wanted to say one more thing. The diversity and inclusion aspect of our work is so important. The ION is anchoring Houston's Innovation District. It's a 16-acre district stewarded by Rice Management Company, Rice University's management company. They run our endowment, and they also have invested in the district here in Houston. And we are building that district with an eye for diversity and inclusion from the ground up, so that everything we do, we're doing with how do we get more women and minorities, not just in the room, not just at the table, but having a voice at the table, having a voice in the room. And we're engaging our community as we do that.
That's wonderful, Christine. And I think you've illustrated the anatomy of what a best practice looks like that goes, starts at this most simplistic level of giving access and then converting that access into connection and collaboration for innovation. That's not always easy to do. And it's really great to hear that you're driving that through ION. I'm going to ask George Safakis, who's been working with organizations of all sizes and scales on the public and private spectrum, to share some best practices to figure out, Christine just gave a great story. Chantaline set the stage for the economics, and Lakshmi shared some of the complexities that, are illustrated in the spectrum of economies in the world and the people that they impact. How do you approach this? What is the blueprint for solving for partnerships that allow us to bring, this problem solving together more effectively?
Well, Kim, you and I have worked together many years now, and Chantaline, I recognize you all, and we all in the end stand on the shoulders of giants. I personally stand on the shoulders of Louis Stokes, a congressman from Cleveland, Ohio, who spent 30 years in the United States Congress, was chairman of our board and helped us create IdeaGen. But the point is, Lou Stokes was talking about exactly what we're talking about today 30 years ago. And suddenly, the empowerment of women and girls is on the front page of every newspaper. Suddenly, inequality is everywhere, right? And I think what we need to do is to extrapolate from what each of you said so articulately. A giant is amongst us in Chantaline. A giant. Chantaline, are we ever not inspired by you? Is this well, I'm just going to tell you, it's with great admiration. You're all doing such incredible things. And I think we stepped up and defined dynamic resiliency as the ability to see around corners and creating partnerships in good times so that when you have a global pandemic, you can, at minimum, continue operations, right? and or thrive in some ways. The Secretary General of our incredible United Nations, just last week at Davos said, the private sector has a key role to play in lifting countries out of both the COVID-19 and the climate crisis. This is the Secretary General, Antonio Guterres. That's what he told business leaders. And what I love about that is that there's been a shift over time where organizations are no longer saying, we got this. We can do this alone. If you can simply recognize that you can't do it alone, then you're open to creating partnerships. And so that's a sea change. The mayor of Houston clearly recognizes that he cannot do this alone. So he's saying to folks like Christine, who's changing the world in Houston, let's partner. Trade. All of the items that Chantaline went through, Lakshmi, you're doing this. You're bringing people together that are changing the world. But the whole thing is not to rebuild. Let's not rebuild. Let's not even go there. You don't want to rebuild. You want to reimagine. You want to reimagine and stick that flag in the ground. And even if it's cloudy or if it's raining, you can still see that flag in the distance. That's what this is all about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, George. I would agree. I mean, the concept of reimagining, collaborating to reimagine where we could go is absolutely key. And when I look at where we are and some of the different scenarios that were just laid out from everyone on this panel, my next question is thinking about workforce of the future, thinking about when we reimagine, who do we need to get there and how are we going to get there? And Chantaline, I'd love to get your perspective, again, standing back and looking at the whole picture. What are some of the areas where you're seeing needs in developing countries that are starting to evolve in a different place much more quickly than they had in the past? And then, sharing that through some of the other conversations we're having, what is the ask that you would have for developed countries to be able to provide better support for these developing countries to drive their workforce efficacy going forward?
I'm really inspired. And by the way, the Women in Cloud is one of the great partnerships that we're looking forward at the UN, because this is exactly the type of thing. It's acknowledging that one company, one sector can't do it. You need to come together. And on the very question of education, we at the UN, the Chief Executive Board did a review of our education system. By the way, that system hasn't been reviewed in more than 100 years. It's never been reimagined. We're talking about reimagining. And now we have to review the way we teach, because we all have to bring online, right? So why not take this opportunity to finally have an education system that train people for the actually new labor market that we have? Because in developing countries, there's no match between the education system, even less in our countries, because our countries, it's a bit better, but it's still not there. Because we're going to the fourth industrial revolution at an exponential rate, and the teaching is still teaching us the same thing that we thought. We need to start teaching creativity at the elementary school level. We need to teach entrepreneurship spirit throughout the curriculum. We need to have more exchanges ongoing with the private sector, with the government sector, so you can actually learn, see problems, solve them, come back and learn it. The way we're teaching is not working. We need to get all these kids online. We got 196 million kids billion kids that had to go online overnight, right? So this is an opportunity to review these archaic systems. And while we're at it, why don't we teach them what Lakshmi is talking about? That Mother Earth is not this separate thing that is forever. It is a living being that is intrinsically linked, and we're increasingly talking about the new economics for sustainable development. One thing is clear, is the economic model we have right now is developing for the few at the expenses of the others and the planet. So we have a lot of blueprint out there. We have the blue economy, we have the green economy, we have the creative economy, the orange economy. We have the purple economy, which is investment in the care economy, which actually create jobs for women instead of construction job, which is for men. And then you double down on basically the inequality in the process of relaunching your economy. Then you can invest in the intentional economy. So this is one of my favorite ones. I put a yellow color, leave the color. But basically, this is the attention economy. So this is the TikTok, the Facebook. So all these algorithms to keep us captivated online, because then the more we click, the more longer we're there, the more money is made. What if we could turn that is in an algorithm, a world game where we all can contribute each our creativity to solving the world's problem, and it's a worldwide competition. Who's doing the best for the people and for the planet, instead of trying to sell little gizmos that are useless, right? So we have literally a network of economists at the UN that we've created, that all the way up from the chief economist. And now UNCTAD and a few other agencies, we've pushed really hard to have economists in each of our country teams. So George, you were talking about, each of the level, and you were talking, we have 193 member states. You know how many member states already consulted their population, albeit in different level, and already made a plan to achieve their SDGs? Most people think like, 50, maybe 20, 168 of them. Most of the countries that haven't done it is because they're at war, or they have some major, like Sudan or South Sudan or Eritrea or something that really, like they just can't do it. And we're hoping the US is going to have its, and this is something, the challenge for the Americans here, the American needs to do its national plan for achieving the SDGs, because you don't have it, and it starts at the local level. These activities start at the local level. And then what is magical about it is because once they do this review, and they say, okay, we're going to prioritize which SDG for my country in consultation with the population. And then they say, oh, we're going to cluster them. And then they say, oh my God, it's not going to work because the labor ministry is doing one thing, education is doing, health is doing, and finance is financing something else. We need to bring them together. So what they do? They create institutional mechanism right under typically the president or the prime minister. You need somebody that has that power. Stop this side approach. Work together. Bring civil society. Bring the private sector and talk to each other, so that at least if you don't synergize with each other, you don't undo what the other one is trying to do, right? And so there's so much going on, but we don't realize sometimes. We think we're like a little drop in the water somewhere, but there's really a momentum. There's also a momentum in, imagine this, women in the cloud, 1 billion women getting access. We have the frontier technologies, right? It's a totally new space. So the men don't have an advantage over women. Why don't we send a moonshot for ourselves? 50% of the asset in the frontier technology needs to be owned by women. And we put all our mind to it. And it's not just, they own the infrastructure, the satellite, the infrastructure, and for the renewable energy as well. Because as women own less than 10% of the asset right now in the world. We're not going to fix this problem until women own asset. And we have a chance to do this. And then the other thing I just want to close on, we will not have a peaceful world, achieve SDG 16, and achieve the other SDGs if we do not invest in this digital divide. And it's not enough to have the infrastructure. I think Christine said it very, very concretely. I love it. Giving the computers to someone is one thing, giving them access to the internet. Most women, or in Africa, some people are willing to go without eating to pay for their connection. And then they're not going to use it to make money. They're going to use it to go on Facebook because they miss that connection with their family. Digital literacy is extremely important. Training in using these devices, and training in the opportunity. We went from, as business, we need to have our ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues correct. We're quickly moving to no, we need to partner with the SDGs. And increasingly, you will see, George mentioned that the Secretary General is calling on mandatory reporting, disclosure of core indicators from the private sector. And those that are in the leading edge, like you guys, will be benefited because you can actually demonstrate to the world how much you're contributing to the SDGs, because we have 33 core indicators to do that. And the other one will be easily identified by consumers and investors as they're not the one I want to support.
Right. Well, that's Chantal, you hit on so many factors that are critical to our success. And if those levers aren't pulled, in the right order at the right time, we lose momentum at any given stage. And you're seeing that happen. As you pointed out, the United States has not set the goals for sustainable development achievement. Yet, when you look at what India has done, and Lakshmi, I bring this back to you, it is one of the most advanced countries in requiring corporations that have any offices in their country to reinvest back into the economy. And they require anywhere from 10 to 20% of a company's revenue in that country to be reinvested into the communities, into educating the next generation of workforce, and ensuring that there's sustainability in India. And I'm curious, Lakshmi, how are you seeing that thrive more given some of what's going on in today's environment?
I was listening to it and I was thinking, most of the things that we think are local problems are really global. And most, like when we talk about women's equality, women speaking up or whatever, I'm just amazed. I mean, I've lived in the US, I've worked in Europe. It's the same story everywhere. And most of the global solutions need to be localized. So when someone comes here and we are talking about, when you talk about numbers, we have over 500 million people who are under the age of 25. We have over 300 million people who are in, 400 million people. Imagine the entire population of US in K through 12 programs. And so when you say, hey, they all have to move online, now 70, 80% of them are in a marginalized community. So to go online, you need a phone. Now you can say, okay, 900 million people in India have a phone, they can borrow their parents' phone. Even when you say that, now they need to have access to data. So, when we are, like, for example, we are working on a program with a company called Polyup in US and various companies in India with slum schools. What we realize is that if we want to give the phones, it's not just enough to give the phones. We got to, through the CSR programs, we get refurbished phones and all that stuff. You need to give them a certain amount of money every month for data packs also, so they can buy those data. So when you're implementing locally, even a global solution, you need to have huge collaborations with the local for-profit companies, non-profit companies, etc. And as George is saying, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't do everything from scratch. Just collaborate with the people who are doing it, but you need to be the systems integrator. You need to integrate and ask the right questions. So what we find is that while the local problems are global, the global implementations have to be localized. And for example, we are working with a company called Muthoot FinCorp on what we are calling Restart India to help the micro entrepreneur, which is the woman who sells vegetables on the side street. These are the people who are hit the most. How do you get them to be digital literate? Like we even did these lesson modules on WhatsApp to say, this is how you use WhatsApp. This is how you turn on WhatsApp. And this is how you make friends. This is how you advertise. And literally in 1 week, it's just amazing how many women, started doing that to market to their neighborhoods to sell cakes or lunches or whatever. So those are the two things. And I just want to say that this is where storytelling is extremely important. We each are telling a story by the way we show up in this world. Storytelling is not about the bedtime stories to get you to go to bed. It's about what you're doing and how can you connect to the rest of the world and say it in 3 minutes or 5 minutes, because the world doesn't have the time to listen to you in this, whether you call it attention economy or lack of attention economy. We have to adapt to that. We can't fight it. I can't just sit here and say, but I used to listen to 1 hour talk that my dad used to take to. It's like, by that time, other people have left the room already by the time I finished that story. So how to adapt ourselves to this. And the other thing I want to say is that the reason I came back to India after living for over 30 years all over the world is India is the biggest lab there is in the world. It's the largest democracy. It's the most complicated democracy. And it is, it's got the numbers of people, youth. I mean, when I said half a billion people under the age of 25, it is mind-boggling to me what we can do to influence them. So I just want to say that it's that collaboration with unusual partners That's extremely important. And to be able to inspire people through stories and having an effect that is more outward, as opposed to I need to do it all myself. You inspire 100 people who can go out and do it themselves. That is the key, is how to lead from behind and how to create leaders as opposed to you wanting to be the one. I think that is the thing we need to change a lot in this new economy. And the last thing I want to leave you with is that in the industrial economy, what we thought is, let me make all the money at any cost, and then I will start giving away. I'll make my billions by messing up the whole world, and then I start giving away. Now it is, you give away at every level. Maslow's hierarchy of theory is not about you do A and then B and then C. You do everything at the same time. Whether you have $5 or $5 billion, you have to think of me and my community and self-actualization at the same time. So when I look at like the vaccine distribution in India right now, we have 1 billion people to take care of. Yes, we may do some things right, some things wrong. But while we are taking care of us, we are also sending stuff to Nepal. We are also sending stuff somewhere. We are also sending stuff somewhere else. You can't wait till I finish everything and then I'll help others. You have to help everybody while you're helping yourself, which means your progress may stall a little bit, but that's the only way you're going to survive in the future. Because what's the point if I'm healthy and everybody around me is passing it back on to me? It doesn't work. So I just want to say that we need to turn Maslow's theory of hierarchy or a lot of, whether it is Ford's division of labor or whatever on its head, and say that in this new world, we need to help the world while we are helping ourselves, not after we help ourselves. And that kind of a collaborative economy is really going to solve the problem. Otherwise, we can be wiped out.
Wow. I think each of you have provided such powerful and impactful perspective. And the multifacets of what we've covered today has just really reminded, I think, all of us of the importance of every aspect of the Sustainable Development Goals is interlocked, right? There's interconnective tissue between every aspect of what we're trying to achieve through collaborative innovation. What I love about IdeaGen bringing all of us together today is because this is exactly what IdeaGen does. And George, I know you've got some other great examples of bringing together leaders like the ones that we have on this panel and converting that to change for good, which is really what we're all here to do. What I'd like to wrap this portion of the session with is what George loves to refer to as the lightning round. And the lightning round is really focused on you providing your perspective on 3 key lessons that you've learned that have the potential to change the world. And Christine, why don't we start with you and give your perspective on what 3 key lessons have you learned?
So the first lesson, just in listening to everyone, find your North Star and be guided by it, and let your values guide you. Because once you find your North Star, nobody can block your view. And you know where you're going, you know why you're going there, and you know your path is going to get you there. So find your North Star and let those values guide you. A leader and an expert, you're not defined by how much you know, you're defined by how many questions you ask. Because that expertise and that knowledge certainly positions you with expertise and knowledge. But if you're not using it to ask questions, then what are you using it for? To give answers that are your answers and to advance solutions that are your solutions, which by definition are not your partner's solutions and they're not other people's solutions. So use your leadership to ask questions. And then number 3, practice with integrity and humility, because you can have all the expertise, all the brilliance, all the partners in the world, but it's really hard to teach integrity, and it's really, really hard to get it back if you goof it up. So lead with integrity. Those are my 3 things.
Thank you so much. Lakshmi, will you share your three
The
things?
first thing, especially because of what happened, is so far this year, last year, is that actually out of destruction comes an opportunity to completely reinvent yourself. It is an amazing opportunity to almost kill everything you held dear and think afresh. It's an unbelievable opportunity, and we need to take advantage of it. I mean, for me, it was like my office space was the most important thing for me. All of us being able to go there and sit there and work was the most important thing. And literally in 5 days, I've decided we're going to shut down our office, walk there. I mean, it's like my room is decorated a certain way. I mean, it's just, I held it so dear. But overnight, I had to like the death of that to something else. Similarly, in our kids' education, I always told my son that, I love that you play soccer, but do your undergrad in computer science or whatever while you play soccer in the evening. And during this time, we have time to be at home. And he convinced me, he says, to me, soccer is my career. I don't want to do something else and do this. And it was a whole new thing for us to think about, to say, what does that mean? And really have to choose to take him to a different country, enroll him in a boarding school, and letting go of him much sooner than we expected, because we had to respect that it's a new birth for him, new life for him. So to be able to kill who you are, and I understood when in Hindu mythology we talk about reincarnation, we think that, oh, in this life, if you do well, you'll do something in the next life. That's not what reincarnation is about. It's about killing yourself almost every day and taking the rebirth the next day as a new person, truly with a new mind. You can't BS yourself, You really have to think, to be able to kill your old values completely and look at it. That was the biggest lesson for me. The second lesson I've always held dear, which is proved even more, is just ask. Amazing how many things open up if you just ask. You have all these facades of how can I ask and what if they say no and blah, 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 whatever. But just goddamn ask, And I'm just amazed by how many things opened up if you show that vulnerability, say, I am drowning, help me. Like 20 people are there to help. So that's the second thing. And the final thing is, for us at Inc., there was a quote that guided us from the beginning. And this is about a quote I heard that says, life ought not to be measured by the number of breaths we take, but by the number of moments that take our breath away. So if that's true, we need to create a world of leaders who can give us breathtaking moments, not just money in the bank. And it's this COVID, if anything, has shown us how many of our houses you have, cars you drive, clothes you have, shoes you have, no use. Because where are you going to wear it to? Just sitting at home in front of a screen, So it has shown us it's that what we need to be greedy about is to creating magical moments. So how do we create leaders who are experiential leaders, not academic leaders? How do we put people through experiences so they are inspired to go out and do something? So that is the biggest lesson for me, is how do you create billionaires of moments, and how do you create a training ground, a breeding ground, a connection ground for it. So we are connected experientially, not academically. So the new schools, the new learning grounds we have to create are experiential and connected, and not just a degree we get by sitting somewhere for 3 years. And these three have been really about a new world of reincarnation, asking, and billionaires of moments. These are the three things that's been really reinforced and woken up for me in a much stronger way than ever before.
Wonderful. Thank you, Lakshmi. That was incredibly empowering to hear. And Chantaline, would you please share your three lessons?
Let me try to take a different. I agree with everything that's been said, and I'm inspired to be with you, ladies, and George. I mean, this is so cool. I think I would start by. I'll go maybe less personal. One is we were not taught when we went to school how to ask ourselves every time we do a plan, every time we do a policy. With this plan, with this policy, who is left behind? Our women, our ethnic group, our rural area people, our indigenous people. Because if you don't ask yourself that question, you will leave somebody behind unless every one of those people are represented in your decision-making process, which is rarely the case, but congratulations if you do. So ask, again, who will be left behind with this design or this policy? And then you're sure to do so much better than you would have done otherwise. Lakshmi, you mentioned helping others while we help ourselves, and this is, I like to think that's what we do at the UN, and that includes supporting the developing countries, especially the least developing countries, micro, small enterprises, and the digital divide in those countries. Think about this: every trade is going online. If you can't trade online as a micro, small enterprise, as a woman-owned company, you're dead. You will be so left behind, and developing countries cannot afford to miss another industrial revolution. And now we're at risk of leaving them behind. So that would be my second one. And then the third is money. I want to end with money, because money, as long as we don't change this system, is still writing what our decision makers are doing. So ask yourself, is my pension fund invested in such a way that actually reflect my value and what I do day to day? Is it supporting the SDGs? Is it supporting at least a transition towards renewable and decarbonized economy, inclusive world, or not? And if not, talk to your advisor, financial advisor, because that is, I think, the largest impact that we can have by ensuring that university pension fund, our pension fund, and others are invested in alignment with the SDGs. And we're getting there, and I believe that disclosure is going to get us even closer to that. So if people are talking about mandatory disclosure of homogenized core indicators, please support it, because then we can all make the right choice.
Wonderful. And one last thing, Chantaline, we didn't talk about it much, but when you think about that economic exclusivity versus inclusivity, right, that we're dealing with today, one of the major programs that the UN has launched is E-Trade for All. And I think it's really important that this particular audience understand more about that. So even if we don't have time to talk about it today, I think it would be good for the session that follows this, where people get a chance to ask some questions, or you could perhaps provide the link for E-Trade for All. I think it really solidifies what you've just said, which is, if I'm not having inclusive impact,
so much. And
then how do I make it so?
E-Trade for All is basically, we do e-readiness assessment. So we go in developing countries and look if are they able to do online payment? Can they actually deliver? Do they have an address where people can actually receive the package? I mean, we go all the way to the whole infrastructure, and then basically make recommendation of how they could be ready for e-commerce. And then basically we have all the partners, the DHL and all of the regional development banks and the UN that can help these countries with specific issues that they want to focus on first. And then as part of the E-Trade for All, we have E-Trade for Women. And there, of course, it's to help. We have 7 women in the digital space, entrepreneurs that are really amazing. And they're basically there to be the face, because women in those countries don't see women in the digital space and don't think they can do it. So to have a if you see it, you can be it, right? So we do that. But we also gave these women the opportunity to talk to policymakers to remove those barriers that prevent them from actually being able to take advantage of online commerce. So I'd like to say more. I'm going to put the link on the chat, and then I can discuss further.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chantaline. And George, I turn it over to you. I know we're wrapping this session, but any closing comments you want to make on what we've taled about today? First of all, I want to thank our panelists, Chantaline, Christine, and Lakshmi. I am honored. This is one of the most profound power panels that I've been part of. And and you really have moved me and humbled me immensely. So thank you for your sharing your time, your perspective, your experiences, and your expertise.
You're
Sincerely.
masterful moderator. My gosh, and what an incredible panel to do this with. You know, it's a round world and life is very short. So I'll extrapolate what I just heard. The first thing is empathy. Empathy is everywhere now. You know, it's on t-shirts, it's on, you know, evening news, it's all, you know, it's everywhere. But empathy, we cannot forget that empathy is not sympathy. And everything I heard everyone talk about is exactly that. And at the same time, I think we need to hold these leaders accountable. You know, across the world now, it's you're this or that. It's not that simple. And I think we need to get into these conversations. What I love about what we do at IdeaGen is we bring in everybody. We talk about everything, and we're talking about solutions. And why I love the global goals is because these global goals are not political. You can make them political, but they're not political. If you're against hunger, if you're against poverty, if you're against empowering women and girls, well, then you need another planet. The point here is that these goals bring people together. And we see them as a galvanizing force. And you heard it coming loud and clear from Chantaline today that, you know, empathy is not sympathy. That the other piece of advice I would give is believe is a word that's difficult. For example, if you're a female entrepreneur and someone says, well, Kim, this is how you do it. You know, you go here, here, and here. You know what? Never believe that there's only one way to do something. You know, you have to be empowered to say, I can do it and I'll find a way to do it. I learned that late in life. I didn't go to a school that taught me that, okay? That's the you know, the life lesson that I had. And then the word imagine came up a lot today. Reimagine, imagine. It's not by accident. Whether you like it or not, I like it. Imagine by John Lennon is a very famous song. Because you're driving down the road and you put imagine on and you say, wow, I can imagine this or that. A world with peace, a world with, you know, blooming trees and a clean environment, whatever it is. And you can imagine that. But Chantaline, you said it, and I'm going to close on this. You said, if you can't see it, you can't be it. So I can only imagine what I've seen. My wife has written the book. I helped a little bit with it. You take what you took from life experience, even if it's a novel and it's fiction, you can't imagine it unless you've seen it. And so exposure, helping those that we now know have been left behind in this digital divide, even right here in the United States of America, helping to address these issues globally is the key. And we have the people here at the table on this conversation that can do it.
Wonderful. Well, thank you. Thank you all. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Christian. And Christian, I'll give you the agenda and the baton back. Thank you, everyone, for your time. And thank you for giving me the opportunity to moderate such a wonderful panel.
Hello, I'm back. I am
Do we have Christian?
speechless.
There he
That
is.
was
Okay.
an incredible a conversation that was so insightful and inspiring, and I hope that the audience enjoyed it as much as I did. I know that you know, the goals and the 17 sustainability goals are so crucial in helping change the world. And you know, with leaders like you doing the work that you all are doing, you know, it's going to be that much easier to achieve these goals by 2030. So I want to thank you all so much for having this conversation and sharing your insight and perspective on the UN goals. Now, we are going to break into our networking and mentoring part of the session. We'll do that for 20-ish minutes, and then we'll come back in for closing remarks. Please feel free to meet speakers, jump around tables, network, share ideas. If you have any questions, there is a help desk on the in the lounge, first table on each floor. So with that, I will break it out into the networking session, and we'll regroup for closing remarks in about 20 minutes. So thank you very much.